You were probably taught that agriculture was one of the greatest achievements in human history. The moment we stopped wandering, started planting seeds, and finally became civilized, progress, the next logical step. But here's something that nobody tells you. For the actual humans living through it, agriculture wasn't a step up. It was a trap. Their bodies got smaller, their bones got weaker, diseases exploded, life expectancy dropped, and once they were in it, there was no way out. This is the story of the biggest bet humanity ever made, a bet most people don't even realize we lost, and why some scientists now call farming the worst mistake anyone in the history of our species ever committed. But to understand why, you first need to understand what life actually looked like before it. Because most people assume our ancestors before farming were starving, desperate, barely surviving. That's not true. Not exactly. For roughly 300,000 years, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, and research into the few hunter-gatherer societies that still exist today, along with skeletal evidence from thousands of years ago, paints a very different picture. These people were, on average, taller than the farmers who came after them. Their bones show fewer signs of malnutrition. Their teeth show less decay. And here's the part that surprises most people. They likely worked less. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups found that many of them spend somewhere between 15 and 20 hours a week actually acquiring food. The rest of the time was rest, socializing, storytelling, and craft. Compare that to a farmer who from sunrise to sunset, every single day, without breaks, without seasons off, was tied to the land. So if hunting and gathering worked, if people were healthier and had more free time doing it, why did anyone switch? And once they did switch, why couldn't they switch back? Around 12,000 years ago, in a handful of regions around the world, independently of each other, humans began domesticating plants. Wheat and barley in the Fertile Crescent, rice in China, maize in Mesoamerica. This is called the Neolithic Revolution. And for a long time, historians assumed it happened because farming was simply better. More food, more security, more control. But that explanation doesn't hold up against the evidence. Skeletons from early farming communities show a measurable decline in height, sometimes several centimeters shorter than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. Evidence of anemia increases. Signs of infectious disease increase dramatically. And this makes sense once you understand what farming actually does to a population. When you rely on one or two crops instead of a wide variety of wild plants and animals, your diet narrows. Your nutrition narrows with it. A bad harvest, a drought, a blight, and suddenly there's nothing to fall back on. Hunter-gatherers facing a shortage of one food source could simply move, or shift to another. Farmers, tied to their fields, could not. And there's a second problem, one that's arguably worse: density. Farming allowed communities to settle in one place and grow larger. But larger, denser populations living alongside domesticated animals created the perfect conditions for disease to spread. Smallpox, measles, tuberculosis, influenza. The vast majority of infectious diseases that have devastated human history trace back to this moment. Animals and humans living close together, waste and water sources contaminated, populations dense enough for pathogens to jump from person to person. Hunter-gatherer bands, small, mobile, and spread out, simply didn't create the conditions for these diseases to exist at that scale. So agriculture didn't just fail to improve life immediately. In many measurable ways, it made things worse. Shorter people, sicker people, harder, more repetitive labor. So why did anyone keep doing it? This is where the trap closes, because agriculture has one advantage that hunting and gathering does not. It produces more total calories per acre of land. Not better calories, not healthier calories. More of them. And more calories means more children survive infancy. Populations relying on agriculture grow faster than populations relying on foraging, even while individual health declines. And once a population grows past a certain size, there is no going back. You cannot feed a village of 500 people by foraging the surrounding land. The land simply cannot support that many mouths without cultivation. The population had already outgrown the old way of life before anyone realized the new way of life was worse. This is sometimes called the agricultural ratchet. It only turns one way. Once a society commits to farming, and its population grows to match, reverting to foraging isn't a lifestyle choice anymore. It's a famine. And it's not just health. Agriculture is also where something else begins, that hunter-gatherer societies rarely had. Property. Land you worked, land you owned, land that could be inherited, land that could be stolen. Archaeological evidence from early farming settlements shows the first clear signs of wealth inequality. Larger houses next to smaller ones, elaborate burials next to simple ones, something almost never seen in hunter-gatherer sites, where resources were typically shared. Farming didn't just change what people ate. It changed who had power over who. It created surplus, and surplus needed defending, which meant walls, and hierarchy, and eventually, armies. Jared Diamond, the biologist and author, once called agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race, arguing that the entire arc of inequality, disease, and overwork that followed can be traced back to that single decision to start planting seeds instead of gathering what already grew. But here's the twist. Most people miss when they hear that argument. It wasn't really a decision at all. No single person, no single generation, chose agriculture over foraging, the way you'd choose one job over another. It happened slowly, gradually, generation by generation, each small step making sense on its own terms. More food, more children, more security in the short term, until, decades later, an entire population found itself locked into a system nobody had actually agreed to. Nobody voted for smaller bodies and shorter lives. Nobody voted for inequality and disease. It simply accumulated, one harvest at a time, until turning back was no longer possible. So was agriculture the biggest mistake in human history? In terms of individual health, freedom, and daily life, the evidence increasingly says yes. Farmers ate worse, worked harder, and died younger than their hunter-gatherer ancestors for thousands of years after the switch. But in terms of what it made possible, it's also the foundation of everything that followed. Cities, writing, mathematics, medicine, the very screen you're watching this on right now. Every gain in human civilization was built directly on top of that ratchet, on top of populations that grew too large to ever turn back. Which means the uncomfortable truth is this: it wasn't a mistake made once. It's a trade we are still making. More people, more complexity, less individual freedom, in exchange for a civilization that, generation after generation, cannot undo the decision that built it. Next time someone tells you farming was the moment humanity finally figured things out, now you know the actual cost of that trade, and why, once the first seed was planted, there was never really a way back.